and welcome to The Art of Grief, a series from the Completed Life podcast. Through conversations with artists, writers, musicians, and storytellers, we will hear how they use their craft to change the shape of their grief. And through their art, we may come to understand that though we might grieve alone, we are never alone in our grief. My name is Lynn Barger-Elliott, and I am the host of Completed Life podcast. Today our guest is Catharine DeLong, who I had the honor of meeting the night before this recording at the Completed Life gathering space, where we hosted a screening of Death Differently, a short documentary on Catharine's work as a music thanatologist. Catharine is a harpist, a hospice chaplain, and an ordained minister affiliated with One Spirit Interfaith Alliance. She's also on the faculties of the Art of Dying Institute and the Accorda Music Thanatology Institute. She's based in Salt Lake City and, as a climate activist, has offered music in natural settings to soothe our suffering planet.
As a person declines physically and mentally, perhaps, their world gets smaller. And eventually the geography of their world might literally be the size of the hospital bed that they're in. So acknowledging them, bringing something that helps them to feel seen and honored, is really important. And it's especially useful for people who have not had a lot of beauty in their life. I've had the opportunity to play for many unsheltered people, and they can't believe it when this harp comes into their space. And they might say, well, why me? Why do I get this? And I can tell them that their doctor sent me, or why not you? Everyone's entitled to have something beautiful and lovely that speaks to their humanity.
Do you think it's the tonality or the cadence, or what is it that's unique to the harp that evokes those emotions or creates that space for people?
There's quite a few things. It's an object of beauty in and of itself. You bring a harp in a room and it's beautiful. I used to sell harps, and I would say every room is more beautiful if there's a harp in it. And this is true. It's a work of art. And then there are the strings that vibrate. And the sound of the vibrating strings, it gradually dissipates. And so while I play one note, that's vibrating another one. It happens, and then they're vibrating together. And that creates a gorgeous fabric that kind of envelopes all of the listeners. So the strings are magic. They vibrate and synchronize with the organs of the body. And we can feel the vibrations, literally.
I suspect walking into a room with such a beautiful instrument just interrupts in the most elegant way all the other dynamics of the rooms, whether it's a hospital room with tubes and machines and beeps, and it in every way just interrupts that.
It does. It does. And a hospital is a place full of fear and noises that really do assault our systems. And while those things are necessary often, and we're grateful to have them, bringing something that's organic, made of beautiful wood, natural materials, it really softens the space. It allows patients, family, and staff to experience the moment a little bit differently. And staff,
Yeah.
I get so many comments from them, and I've walked out of patient rooms before and there's been a doctor or somebody kind of with their head leaning against the door, just listening, taking it all in. I had one nurse say to me, if I can just hear a few notes as I walk by, I feel better and I can do this job a little bit better.
Right. You're there in theory for the patient, but no one escapes this beauty or the sound and the vibrations just,
Yeah.
I think, linger in the room, but also down the hall. And I could imagine people just standing outside the door wanting to.
Yes. And you think that, oh, it's this sweet little soft instrument, but the music is potent and it does cut through a lot of other sounds and can be heard from quite a distance. And I want to say what a privilege it is to walk in a patient's room. They are so vulnerable and fragile, and this is intimate space. And I remember the first time that I was doing my internship and was invited into a patient's home and set up my harp next to their bedside. And I was just really humbled and amazed that they would let me be with them in this very intimate time. It's such an honor to be able to do this work.
Yeah, intimate is the word that does come to mind because it's a small space, but you are couched up close to their bed. There is no personal space in a hospital room, but you're right there with them in the most intimate way.
I get to witness what's going on with them in that moment, and their cries for pain, out of pain, and their mental anguish. It's intense work, but it's also gratifying to feel like you can make a difference in this moment, in this hour, that they might be able to rest. For some people, just closing their eyes and resting is a gift.
Tell us about your strategy, so to speak, when you walk into a room. What are you looking for, listening to? What are you aware of?
Usually before I go into a room, I've looked at a medical record or I've had a call from a nurse telling me a little bit about what's going on. So I have some information. And that's useful, but it might go all out the window as I see what I see in the bed. One of the main things that I focus on when I sit down is matching my music, the rhythm of the music, with the respiration of the patient. This is really useful in helping a person feel like they're not walking alone. It's a way of subtly companioning them. And I follow them. I don't have an agenda of any kind other than following their respiration. I do notice oftentimes that the music gets slower as they relax a bit. Their face might relax. I see fists that might be clenched, and then the hands open up. You can key into some of these things. And I also pay attention to the family. Is there tension between family members? Is that adult child or the parent, we see it all. How are they doing? So while the patient is my top priority, and yes, I play according to their needs, but I'm very much aware of what else is going on in the room. If I'm referred to see a patient, let's say, who is really depressed, is having trouble accepting their diagnosis, or just depressed. When you don't feel well, it's hard to not be down. And so I'll start playing something perhaps in a minor key that reflects their mood. I'll try to meet them where they are.
Can you play a few minor notes just so we can hear what that sounds like? When you go into a room, do you compose as you play, or are these pieces that you're familiar with, or where do you find the music? How do you determine what music is right for the moment?
There is a prescriptive nature to what I choose. So if I'm playing for someone who's depressed, I start with something, I don't want to say depressing, but in a little, it has more
The
minor intervals. And then that might change as we go along. I do improvise. So that piece I just played, I play that fairly often, but I never play it the same. Mm. Sometimes I'll play very, very spare offering, not a lot of notes. Sometimes I'll play quite a few notes. If I play not very many notes, that's a little more cooling than if I played something with lots of notes, lots of, let's say, intervals of a second or a seventh that are kind of warming. There's a little tension there. So if somebody has a high fever, I might play very simply. That little piece I played has a very narrow range. It's only 5 notes, from the lowest note of the melody to the highest note of the melody. And that offers a calming sensibility. If I played for you the Star-Spangled Banner, which has a very wide range, it's almost not singable, that's stimulating. And so, generally speaking, I go for something that's a little more calming. That little piece is good for people who are in pain. Very simple. The melody is stepwise, meaning that it goes from one note to a note next to it.
I don't know how many strings are on there, but you certainly have a lot of options with what are there, maybe 30, 40 strings?
34.
34, and then you have the levers. So there's quite a few combinations. But you said in a recent interview that the longer you are at this craft, at this caregiving, the fewer notes you play. How did you come to discover that about your work?
You don't need a lot of notes to do a lot of good with this business. Just some long resonating bass notes are very effective. It's so simple. And the simplicity and the sparseness allows space for the listener to go wherever they go in their mind, to perhaps let go of holding tightly to anything. It really is an invitation to them to be free.
As you're playing here in this space, not only can I hear the music, but I can feel it physiologically. I can feel the vibrations just kind of hovering in the room, but also settling onto my body. Is that the effect that you hear about, or is that something that you see happening in the bodies in the room, that they just kind of absorb the vibrations?
Yes, and I do believe that's part of the magic of the harp. Because the strings vibrate and the sound decays very gradually, it really does travel to our bodies. Our skin is porous. Our bones are wonderful transmitters of vibration because they're so hard. So you hear the music, just like you explained, and you feel the music. I play for people who are hard of hearing all the time. And it's obvious they're receiving the music. I'll get a thumbs up, and I'll receive all sorts of positive affirmations that they're receiving the music. And oftentimes family members will say, oh no, they're hard of hearing. And I'm like, let's just give this a try.
That's such a great visual, that it's vibrating to your bones. And when you said that, I thought that's what's happening. I can feel it in my body.
Yeah, and our skull is a wonderful resonator.
Mm-hmm. I did a little research in the last week about harpists and kings and queens. King David, of course, is from the Hebrew Scriptures, is one of the most famous harpists. And Marie Antoinette, apparently, Queen of France, played the harp. And I was surprised to learn, although I should have known this, that one of the Marx brothers, Harpo.
Yes, and he chose his name Harpo before he played the harp.
Ah.
And he bought himself a harp and taught himself to play. And then he said to himself, maybe I'll get some lessons. And there was a famous harpist named Mildred DeLong who lived in New York City. And he came to her for lessons. Wow. And he was playing the harp on the wrong shoulder. And Mildred straightened him right out. And he was a good harpist. And the film, I believe Animal Crackers, has wonderful, wonderful slapstick sort of improv that he does. And you can't do all the things he did without knowing a few things. And I actually, when I was 13, took a lesson from Mildred DeLong.
Oh, wow.
That's why I kind of know this. Yes, and she was very elderly. But it was fun to know this little backstory about Harpo. But he was a very gifted musician.
Yeah, that's what I read. I did not know that. The harp has had a long role in mythology and in religious literature. And the Greeks believed that the harp was created by the god Apollo as a gift to goddess Diana. In Hebrew Scriptures from very early on, the 4th chapter of Genesis, one can read that Jabal was the first musician, and that he was the father of all who played the harp and flute. So very, very early in Hebrew literature. The harp is mentioned more than any other instrument in Hebrew Scriptures. And scholars as well as devotees have discerned there's a sense that God draws near when the harp is played, and that there was a belief throughout the Hebrew Scriptures that when a harpist would play, that it would kind of appeal to God's presence to draw near. In Christian literature, heaven is often depicted as a place where angels are playing the harps. We think of the pearly gates, and there's usually an angel strumming there. And in the final book, the book of Revelation, God's voice is described as the sound of harpists playing their harps. What do you think it is about the harp that has allowed it for millenniums to be associated with something holy, something sacred, set apart from a worldly presence?
In some hospitals, the music thanatologist is under the umbrella of the spiritual care team, because it really is a spiritual offering that we bring to patients and their families. And it feels that way to me as I'm playing it. It cuts through some of the worldly tensions. And it's hard to put words on it. Sometimes I'll just say, it's just magic, or the mystery is here with us. Because this does not speak on behalf of any one religion. It speaks on behalf of what is greater than all of us. That we have in common, that binds us as people. I oftentimes have the privilege of witnessing a patient having an interaction with someone in the room that I cannot see. And this happens very commonly. A patient's countenance will change. They will look up to the far corners and the higher places in the room. and I've had them speak to beings, and there's obviously something going on that is not within my view, but I'm very aware of it. And it's comforting. It's comforting to have the sense that there are people waiting, encouraging the patient perhaps to let go, to unbind from this world. I'm imagining that encouragement is a good thing, and that it's going to be okay, and we're here for you.
Yeah. Yeah. We did a podcast on, we call them night visions.
Yes.
A couple months ago. And it's something that we don't talk about a lot, or is considered delusion or an effect of the drugs, but it's actually a very common thing.
Common. And the medical terminology that is used is they're hallucinating. And that always offends me, because they're not hallucinating at all.
They're very clear and very calm.
Yes.
And comforted.
Yes. And I had one gentleman who was slumped over. I felt like he was not there. At least he was not responding to me. And I began playing, and he sits up and begins conversing with a friend. And he says, "Tommy, I can't get out of this chair, or I would come." But the joy on his face was really something. And then the episode ended, and he went back into a sleeping, unresponsive state. It was quite something.
Yeah, and you're on the front line of something that is really on another plane. It's and that fluidity of the dying patient to be able to connect with other planes is really wonderful.
I can't quite connect the dots that, the music kind of opens a portal for that to happen, but it happens all the time.
It's fascinating. You used a word last night, and you just said it, that I sense is a very visual word and very broad too in its meaning, but the unbinding or unbound. So talk about that a little bit, and what is that dynamic when you, with the dying patient, but also within the family in the room, and what are we unbinding from? What requires to be unbound?
Dying can be hard work. I had one patient that I played for, and she says, "This is a lot harder than I imagined." And
you don't think about that.
Yeah, I so appreciated her putting into words that it's a project to leave this place. I think for some it's easier than others, but if one is afraid, they hold more tightly onto their body. If they're in a lot of pain, they also may hold on to the body. And we have strong familial connections. We don't want to not be there for the graduation or the wedding or whatever it is. It's hard to leave our people. So I think that education is part of the unbinding process, but when you're in it, it's hard work. And having conversations with people you love, maybe there's some things that need to be said, some forgiveness. Offering forgiveness, asking for forgiveness. Pure expressions of, "I love you." And I think all of us go through life, we can't go through life without bumping into some suffering. And there can be some, I don't want to say closure exactly, but wholeness around our experience. as we acknowledge what this life has been for us and express gratitude. A long death or a protracted dying process leaves time and space to do a lot of that work. 90% of people die gradually.
And what does gradually, is there a time frame on that, or?
It might be years long that a person is dealing with dementia, heart disease, diabetes, you know, all of those things that pharmaceuticals and our medical profession can help you last longer, I would say. But I always like to consider quality of life.
The power of music to heal has been known and recognized by ancient and indigenous cultures. Can you tell us a little bit about when the practice of using music to care for the dying came into being, and when did that become a practice?
I think it's been with us for a long time. We know that the monks and sisters in 11th century France at the Cluny Monastery would surround the bed of a dying person and sing. Their motto was care for the body, cure for the soul. And that's kind of one of the models that music thanatology is built upon. I think music has always been recognized as being powerful. In Greek mythology, Apollo, who had a harp, I believe he was the god of music. His son Orpheus, on his wedding day to Eurydice, a snake bit her and she died. And Orpheus took his harp and went down to Hades and used the harp to pass many gates and was able to bring her back with him until that story kind of went belly up, because he was told by Hades that Eurydice would follow him and he was not to look back. And he did, and lost her a second time and forever. So,
I need you to play the harp to make me that story. It just washed over me.
I know, but the power of this instrument has been acknowledged throughout mythology, throughout really earliest times. We know that there are paintings in King Tut's tomb of harps. So that's a long time. We believe that it's one of the first instruments and that it derived from the bow, as in bow and arrow. And that even now you can pluck a bow, even a compound bow, and there's a significant vibration.
Yeah.
So they added more strings to that bow. They added a sound box and then a column on the front to stabilize the instrument, and used animal gut for the strings.
So it truly is an all-natural instrument.
It is.
Organic.
Some of the mechanisms, of course, have been modernized, but the instrument is basically the same. And that's one of the things that I love about it, is that with all of our technology, the essence of this instrument is unchanged. And its effect upon humans is magic. I'll go back there. It really is. a powerful tool to soothe.
Indeed. Yeah. The word thanatology has roots in the god Thanatos,
Yes.
the god of death, and it's a discipline, a study around death and dying. But even though it has deep presence, it was in our deep presence in our history. It was really named as a discipline, if I understand it correctly, about 40 years ago, or kind of parallel with the hospice development. So can you tell us a little bit about that history and how it's evolved?
Yes, the founder in modern times is Therese Schroeder-Schieker, and she is a medievalist. She was studying medieval arts. She also was a vocalist, and she was putting herself through school working at a rehab center or nursing home, I guess. And she saw people dying alone with the TV as their only companion. And one day there was a gentleman who had been very resistant to kindness, let's say. And he was seriously dying, and she came close to him and began singing to him. And he held her hand, grabbed her tightly, and she sang until he was gone. And that was considered the first music vigil. And she further developed this program, and she's the one who knew about what was going on in Cluny, France. And it all came together. So I would describe it as what's old is new again.
Yeah. How was it determined that music thanatologists would be harpists?
I think the harp decided that for us, because it does work like no other instrument does. A guitar is a stringed instrument with a soundboard. That would be maybe the closest. But there again, the strings don't resonate for as long as what we have on the harp. And we can have so many notes resonating together, which I think is part of the magic.
In your work as a music thanatologist, you've extended your care to nature.
Mm-hmm.
I came across a beautiful YouTube video of you playing the harp on a sandbar in the Great Salt Lake, and I found it so deeply moving. And the great environmentalist and preservationist John Muir also made the connection between the harp and nature. He said, every hidden cell has within it music and life, every fiber thrilling like harp strings. How did you begin to make the connection between your work as a music thanatologist and its capacity for creation care and healing?
I currently live in Salt Lake City, and the beautiful Great Salt Lake that gives us our name is drying up. Part of this is due to climate change, but the drying up process has more to do with the three rivers that feed this lake, which is a terminal lake. It has no place where the water exits. It just evaporates. But the three rivers, their waters are being diverted upstream for various projects, for agriculture, for business. And we're losing our lake. And it's considered by many to be on hospice. this lake is valuable, even though it has a high saline ratio, more salty than a regular ocean. But within this salty sea, inland sea, we call it, brine shrimp and brine flies, their whole evolution happens within this lake. And as the lake gets more saline, their process is dying. And it's these brine shrimp and brine flies that feed the birds. We're on a main north-south flyway. It's part of the Pacific Flyway that sustains so many birds, and we're going to lose them. There's an island called Gunnison Island in the Great Salt Lake, and for as long as we know, there's been pelicans that have inhabited Gunnison Island. It's their rookery, I think that's what we call it. And within the last year, they all left. We're talking hundreds of thousands of pelicans. And so as one brings music to a person who's on hospice, it's felt important to bring music to this lake that is on hospice as a way of shining a light, maybe bringing some attention to the plight of this lake. Our state government does not seem to value the lake as much as they value business and agriculture. And so you just don't know who might be moved and see the lake in a different light. So that's one reason that I made that video. And another is I wanted to give something back. I wanted to literally bring some music to the water, to the fowl, to all of it. And it's interesting to imagine what is the value of my offering? Who hears it? Who receives it? Is it something that just takes place in my heart? What is happening? I see kayakers over there, curious, rowing towards me. And so I really like to hold that thought. Does it matter that we bring music that we might want to offer comfort to ourselves and to whoever, whatever beings are listening?
What did that do to you physically, to be out there and to be attuned to the rhythms and to the maybe groaning of nature? What did that do to you?
It was hard work, actually. The wind was blowing, and I think there may be a point or two where you can hear a little bit of the strings ringing while I'm playing. And so to stay focused on what I'm trying to do and also enjoy this voluntary string strumming that the wind is doing. But where I was playing, this was at the Great Salt Lake State Park. The funny part about that whole day is that I had planned very carefully what I was going to play, what I was going to wear, all of the things that we do. And I had not accounted for the fact that the water was a long way from the parking lot where I unloaded my harp.
Because it had dried up?
It had dried up. Yeah, the level was very low. So I had to take my harp on its little dolly more than a half a mile over all sorts of sand. You know how sand changes textures and qualities. Sure. By the time I got to the water, I was a wreck. I was sweating and shaking, and I'm like,
windblown.
Exactly. I'm like, I didn't plan any of this, which is kind of the nature of things. And so I got out on my little finger of land and was really just trying to breathe. And I was reminded of end-of-life patients who struggle breathing, and I was just trying to kind of get a grip. The place where I was playing also was very close to the Salt Lake International Airport, close to a major freeway. The sound of 18-wheelers was just like a humming thrum.
You had lots of accompaniment that day.
Yeah, so we had the 18-wheelers, we had the planes, we had some seagulls, and I really kind of had to focus on being in it and not distracted by all of the transportation that was happening around me.
You are in many rooms when people are actively dying. Is there anything you wish their families or loved ones knew about what you witness and experience?
Dying is a natural process, and we all get to do it. One per person. And I think if we accept that, I don't want to minimize the fact that it's not easy to lose someone that you love. I think it goes better when we express that love. When we accept what is. And yes, I'm in those rooms often. And I can do it, but it's a different deal when it's my people. So I can be rather, oh yeah, well, just accept it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't mean to be, I mean to minimize the importance and the connections and the anticipatory grief. My job is to witness, to honor, to hold space for people. And the music helps me do that for them and with them. Go in peace, go in kindness, go in love, go in faith. Leave the day behind us. Day is done. Go in grace. Let us go into the dark, not afraid, not alone. Let us all by some good pleasure safely to arrive at home. I have the privilege of working with music thanatology students, with teaching them the basic elements of the harp so that they can be prepared as they enter a patient room. There's a new music thanatology school called the Accorda Music Thanatology Institute. And it's a privilege and fun to prepare the next generation of music thanatologists because there are not enough of us.
I knew this would be an extraordinary honor and privilege to have this time with you today and last night. But what I didn't realize is that there are fewer than 100 of you. This is such a new discipline and poised for growth. So this is truly an honor. You are a legend in being one of 100 professional music thanatologists on the planet, and it must be an added honor to be part of building up your profession and ushering new thanatologists to join you in this extraordinary work.
It is gratifying to bring in a new generation of music thanatologists because the first music thanatologists we're aging. I mean, let's tell the truth. And so we need new young people who are interested in doing something meaningful. So for anyone who's listening, Accorda Music Thanatology Institute.
And would you give us the name of your website one more time so we could, if somebody wanted to contact you, they could?
You can find me at DeLongHarp.com. DeLong is my last name. DeLongHarp.com. There are music samples there, and feel free to reach out. I want to be of support to anyone who has a question or needs some advice about music.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Catherine. This has been so informative, enlightening, soothing, therapeutic, and you have cared for our souls today as well. So thank you.
It's been a privilege for me as well. I've loved being with you today. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Art of Grief. The music you heard throughout the interview was performed by Catharine DeLong at the Completed Life Gathering Space. To hear more of her music, I encourage you to visit her website, DeLongHarp.com. And thank you to Jed Olbaum, the sound editor for the Art of Grief series. Credit for the promotional photo of Catharine DeLong goes to Zaza Weissgerber. To listen to other episodes of the Art of Grief series, as well as other Completed Life podcasts, please look for us on your favorite podcast platform or go to our website, completedlife.org, where you can find our podcasts under the Program tab. We love to hear from our listeners. If you have a story to share or would like to respond to this episode, please email us at info@completedlife.org. Thank you again for joining us.